think you're unique until you're in this international modeling scene. You see like 50 of your clones and you're like, okay, why would they pick me?
Yeah.
That's a good idea. I like
Some
that.
fun brainstorming. Welcome, Sophia, to my new podcast. Thank you so much for being willing to sit down and chat with me. I know we've had many conversations, but you've become a very good, close friend, a mentor of sorts. You've given me some opportunity that's led to other opportunities, and I'm excited for us to hopefully be able to work together again in the near future. And you have so many things coming up. I'll let you, explain some of those as much as you want or whatnot. But you have the brightest future. You have a great, bright personality. You have such a wonderful energy. It's been a blessing knowing you as far as I've known you so far. And so I know you got some cool next steps ahead of you, potentially with some travel and potentially doing some cool work. So yeah, I'd love to know just, right off the bat, I know you have a background in international modeling, which is crazy enough just to say that. And now you work in kind of personal branding and marketing and that industry. You have your own niche and sector in that space. But what is some of the things that you've learned along the way? Because some people can look at the shift, right? Modeling to marketing and think, well, maybe she's confused, right? Maybe she doesn't know what she's doing. But I know, because we've talked about this, and I have my unique background too, where your modeling and all of that has informed your marketing. It's informed the things you've done and actually made you much better for it. So yeah, maybe we can just start off. You can share a little bit of wisdom and advice on how to use your background, no matter what it is, to inform that next step and to really fall into the actual path that your natural giftings lay in.
Yeah, well, awesome. Thanks for the intro, Josh. And yeah, it's been wonderful working with you as well. And for branding, I'd say what's really interesting when I was modeling that I didn't realize was that I was already my own entrepreneur. And in a weird way, you are the product. So when you're working in business, you're usually selling some type of product. But when you're a model, you are the product that you're selling. So when I was able to start changing my mindset to understand that I was actually a business and that I could separate my own identity as, okay, Sophia the model or Sophia the professional versus who I really am. So even in my 20s, I really struggled with that. I was like, oh, is what I'm putting out fake or this? But then you realize this was kind of before personal branding became a buzzword or people really knew what it was. Maybe it applied to models and actors more so over time.
Sure.
But yeah, what was interesting was starting to develop that mindset because you're able to also detach a little bit where you're like, okay, this is my professional persona. And how do I then sell and market that? And you're dealing also with customer success. So the clients who book you, there's a lot of misconceptions in modeling that it's just your looks and that's what books the job. No, they like people who are professional, on time, or have a good personality. And then you need to network on it. You can't just put your headphones in and zone out. You need to get to know them. And then when they have a job, they suggest you the next time. So it's the same thing. It's networking. How do you keep in touch with a client? How do you get rebooked? How do you get inbound leads versus outbound leads? So in a most interesting way, I wish I had the vocabulary for it at the time, but I didn't realize I was my own entrepreneur and I was getting a masterclass in personal branding. And I think working as a model too, you're always on set with tons of different brands. So I was getting the viewpoint of watching these amazing marketing teams work on huge productions, on very intricate levels. So, but it was a strange thing to have modeling. I just kept thinking of myself as a model until I came back into business. And then I started seeing the parallels so much like, oh, okay, my influence or my social media actually transfers to LinkedIn or to professional influence. And, oh, I already was doing this as a model, like my own business. So it just, everything started to click even more. And I started to have my own unique success in business because I was leveraging everything I learned from modeling and marketing. And I had such a different viewpoint. And I was able to leverage personal branding a little sooner than other people, I think, in sales. So that was an interesting thing coming back and seeing that inbound sales or social selling was really taking off for tech companies. And even still now, employees are really just starting to pick up on that. Like, hey, maybe I should be building my personal brand aside from my job. So, yeah, to kind of answer that, it was interesting because it wasn't even just personal branding that I took over from modeling, but
Mm.
entrepreneurship in general that I think nobody really views modeling that way. And even now, it's interesting for me to talk to a model and try to tell them, like, do you know you're an entrepreneur, you're a product? And they're like, whoa, mind blown, right? But when
Yeah.
you're able to see yourself that way, you also are able to like map a different success chart for yourself.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, right? Because it's the high performance mindset. And a lot of athletes, like you look at a Michael Jordan, which obviously a very exceptional example, but what made Michael a household name is frankly not even his skill set in basketball, but rather the decisions that were made business wise by his mother, by him, to be able to have a shoe, have an entire line, have a legacy. I forget the numbers. I heard it a while ago, but it's he made X amount of millions from his basketball career, and he made X amount of billions from the wise business decisions he made, leveraging his name, leveraging his brand to be able to become an entrepreneur. And that's what I think. And I love that about you and how you help others kind of figure that out as well. That if you have the success mindset in a specific space and you are a high performer, it carries. It carries into relationships, it carries into business, it carries into. So if you just learn the skill set, if you're a model, but you take time to actively learn the skill set of business, you have the mindset and the discipline and the work habit oftentimes that translate. And in your case, you actually had a lot of the skill set too, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly right. I actually had my mentor in modeling at the time because I didn't connect that myself.
Mm,
He was a judge on Asia's Next Top Model. They call
nice.
him the godfather of fashion in Singapore. His name's Daniel Bowie. He's amazing. And he reached out to me after and said, you know, you got to come to Singapore. You're going to do really well here. But then I was standing there. I remember it so well in a casting lined up next to all these young girls, like 14-year-olds from Russia or, 16-year-olds from Brazil. And you think you're unique until you're in this international modeling scene. You see like 50 of your clones and you're like, okay, why would they pick me over this 14-year-old? And you're not using your smarts or anything. And I had just given up my job in tech and I was managing teams and I was having a total crisis thinking like, what did I do? I made the biggest mistake of my life. And I told him that after, and he was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Like but he said, is this something you always wanted to try? And if so, what made you successful in business? And I started naming things like, well, I started just trying to learn it really well, becoming an expert. I started going to networking events. I was trying to learn from people at the company or the industry. And he's like, exactly. So he's like, you need to start doing that for modeling. He's like, if you're going to do it and change your whole life, give it some time and go all in.
Mm,
So he's like, trade your TechCrunch magazines for Vogue, right? Start studying posing. If that seemed ridiculous to me at the time, like, oh, study modeling, like really pose in front of the mirror and, walk. But I did it all. And even like someone would come over and put cameras to see like the way that I was walking, from all these different angles, which you don't realize is a skill, but it does. It all comes with experience.
right.
And once I started going all in is exactly when my career started taking off. Because he was like, you taking your business skills and applying it, he's like, is going to make you a top model compared to all these other girls who look like you. He's like,
Mm,
that's the skill. And so it's exactly what you're saying. It's more, what do you know? And like, what are you willing to put into that and
yeah.
focus and become an expert? But then I think you don't have to do that forever, right? Like you need to, there's the whole book, like 10,000 hours. I don't think you really need to in some, but once you get to that point, then you can scale back because now
Mm,
you've made your name or you've become a top, you have a respected name in that industry.
yeah. Wow. That's a good perspective too. I've heard them say, in track and field or in swimming, the difference between the top like 10 people is like a millisecond, half a second. But the difference between those top 10 and average is 20 seconds. So the percentage difference is dramatically different from high performers, but amongst high performers, to be the top 1%, to be the winner, it's all those minute details that in a mirror I have to pose in yes, of course, because it's like you said, the different angle. That's so cool, right? The different angles to watch you walk. And that's why I think it's so important to have a mentor, to have a coach. I was talking to a gentleman a couple of years ago. He was doing a lot of bodybuilding on his own, entering competitions, winning competitions, low level stuff. And he said he actually wanted to get his IFBB Pro card, which is I can't IFBB Pro. There you go. Say the full sentence. He wanted to get his pro card, and he went to, I forget if he was competing or he just went to watch one of the meets, like as a spectator, and he was like, "Oh, well, shit." It's like, I need to get a coach. There is no way I can compete at the highest level alone. I need a team. I need a dietitian. I need people that can tell me things and point out my weaknesses. And hey, your left lat is actually a little flat, and you need to get some more pump in there, and you need to do this. And why don't we do single arm pull down to get all those little things that as the individual, you might not know exactly which muscle group you need to focus on or target, but with the right coach who like sees the body as this muscular diagram. And well, if you do a little bit extra here and tweak this and tweak, and I'm sure you probably did some of that in modeling, right? Is, hey, Sophia, your form is not, or your figure is not perfect. Diet like this, or drink this honey concoction this morning to clear your bloating. Or I'm sure you probably did some of that stuff, right?
I mean, I didn't do that type of stuff, but yeah, absolutely. When it came to posing, it seems like such a silly thing, but lighting, like angles, like all of that comes with expertise where you could shoot like this and give a client a result. And that's what they're looking for. Experts at their craft. Yeah, in any profession. So that's a perfect example, is working on your muscles, and not everyone knows how to do that, or even the motivation to go to the gym. So it's not even just their expertise, but having someone pushing you along, because it's very hard to keep yourself accountable, especially in roles like entrepreneurship or even modeling, because you really are on your own, and you have agencies. But that was, again, the difference, me being able to apply my business, where I could go into the agency. I knew how to pressure them, or, follow up with them, give them my business plan, my plan. Like, hey, this is my plan. How are you going to help me here? And they would always be shocked, because they're like, you're the only model that's ever walked in here with a spreadsheet. I'm like, really? But, you have to direct your life and your career. And that's what I think I always see with high performers, is they have goals and long-term goals, and they know how to break that down into smaller sections to be like, okay, this isn't just some random dream. This is an actual step to get here. And like you're saying, then if you don't know how to get from one step to another, you just find a mentor, you find a coach, you join a community of people who have, but there's always a way there.
Yeah. Well, it's oh, I just totally lost my train of thought.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I had such a good point to add on to what you were saying there.
Happens.
It'll come back to me as it's coming back to me, by the way. And I love that. That's such a good, everything you were saying is, I'm with you 100%. But the one thing I think we're all dying to know is, did you ever spit gum on the streets of Singapore and get arrested?
I did not. I was very careful with that. But there is an energy there. You can feel it's quite strict. So a lot of models smoke cigarettes. So sometimes I'd be outside with them. But I guess if there's no like covering, so even if the building was like this much of a covering, like you could smush yourself on the wall and smoke. But if you couldn't stand like here, or police will come up and like take your ID, like you got a whole ticket, you might go to jail. So they're very strict on the laws. Yeah.
Did you feel like almost a relief coming back to America in a sense? Like, obviously there's beauty all around the world for different reasons, but I think, and I've always realized this, coming back to Canada or even back to America from traveling abroad, even though some places maybe are more physically beautiful, or maybe I even like the culture more, I am always grateful to come home to the different freedoms that we have here. Maybe less in Canada right now, but we won't get into that.
We like to say people kind.
But yeah, how was your experience kind of coming home from after all that?
Yeah, I was ready. I was ready to come home. I loved Asia. I love everything about every country I went to. And especially I was in my 20s. It was just so much fun. But there is a different energy in the US. I think It's a delicate topic to go into, really, with international things, because when I was traveling, so much of me would sometimes pretend to not be from the US. So I would say, like, yeah, I'm from Japan because people are just ragging on it.
Sure.
To almost the point of illusion where I was almost thinking, like, is it going to be really crazy when I go back to the US? Like, it just seems like there's such a weird reputation overseas from what they
Hmm.
see on the news. Um, but then I remember coming back and just the ease of everything, the freedoms that we have are different. And the only best way I can describe it is that when you're in countries that follow a lot of rules, that stems down to the individual. So even if you went to, say, a restaurant and you wanted to sub a cheddar cheese with a feta, and maybe you don't want eggs, or you want this, what it says on the menu is scrambled, but you want it over easy. To ask for that would have been a whole ordeal. Like the waiter
Really?
would have freaked out. They're not sure. They're like, I don't know, that's off the menu. They'd have to go ask the manager, and then the manager usually is uncertain as well. They might have to ask the owner. If the owner's not there, they're just telling you, like, no, not possible.
Wow.
I don't know. It could be different now. This was, decade ago, but it's just a different mentality because there's people who are used to following the rules, which is fascinating. And
Hmm.
so this would go to many small interactions, like even maybe asking for a to-go cup when you had, because you have to, like and it'll create like a whole ordeal. So things like little things like that, you take for granted here in the
Yeah.
US, that I think when I came back, I was like, wow, things are just easier, I suppose. There's more freedoms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a weird dichotomy, right? Like some people will say, I would rather give up freedoms for the safety. Because I've been to Singapore as well. I remember they were telling us on this tour that we were on, you can, if you're a woman walking alone at night, our crime rate is like 1% or whatever. I'm making that up, but it's almost abysmally low, or non-existent. And, if a man's walking at night and there's a woman on the road, he'll purposely walk on the other side of the road it's more respectful in that sense. There's much less crime, but it's also a surveillance state. They have like 3 cameras per every square meter, or I'm exaggerating the numbers, but it was like a ridiculous amount of cameras when I went 8 something years ago. And then they said, yeah, and if you get caught stealing, like we'll cut off your hands potentially, or we'll beat you and whip you. And then it's like, so it's the dichotomy of, okay, safety and everything else, but with insane repercussions. So do we want that? Is that what a free society has? Is it? And so that's why
Yeah.
I always say I respect everyone's culture. I don't necessarily think I want to live in everyone's culture though.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating, because definitely having been more well traveled and actually living in these countries, not like I just go for 2 weeks, like I was full on
Right.
living there for years or based out of there, and you really enmesh yourself into those cultures, is how interesting it is. It's like if you haven't experienced a different one though, you're going to double down on what you have. If that, like, I would see that a lot where it's like, no, right? This is the safest place, this is the best country in the world. But it's like, but how do you know if you have never experienced a different opposite, like here? Because they think that's more free. But have you experienced a different kind of freedom to be able to actually compare that? So that's where I think we're always going to have issues with these conversations and debates,
Agreed.
because you can really only gain different perspectives by experiencing them. But everyone wants to double down on their one experience, I suppose,
Yeah.
or the ones they've had.
Well, it's something too. I think I would say you've helped me in this regard over the last almost year now that we've known each other. In helping me, I would say expand my mindset to understand that not everything is black and white, but in fact, most things are gray. And I know that. I think everybody knows that. But when you become so dogmatic in any belief system, whether it's religious, it's political, it's, whatever, my country is the best country, by what metrics? What does that mean? Is that subjective? Is it objective? Because a country can be objectively better at educating their students on geography. That's a very specific metric. But how does that now relate to like livable everyday life, right? And well, how does that relate to median income level and happiness indexes? And what the heck is a happiness index? And so there's so many things in this world. And now, moving into our relationship when it came to marketing and business and how I think I did have a black and white approach to certain things I was doing. And then after meeting you and having a ton of conversations about even energy and about just the way that we come off to people. And some days I would tell you like, I don't know, Sophia, like no one's responding to me. I don't know what's happening. And you're like, yeah, it's one of those weeks where people's energies are off because of this and that. And you and I sometimes maybe like disagree on different terminology, or we have our own thoughts on, you know, the universe or God or whatever. But I think we're on the same page pretty much though, about the fact that energetic connections and the energy we give off to each other is so much more potent than I think I was accounting for. So actually, I'd love to know your thoughts even on, you know, moving into business now and dealing with more transactional. Well, maybe they were also transactional in the modeling world, but probably more so to a degree in business. How have you leveraged your sixth sense of a sort and being a very discerning person energetically and knowing who to work with and how to attract, but also when to repel and when to pursue and when to sit back and let things come to you? And how has your kind of understanding of these energetic links really informed your business decisions, especially into now where you're at?
Yeah, I love this topic. As you know, it's my favorite one. So I'm glad we're talking about it because it's still not talked about as much, I think, in the business space. But what's been so fascinating to me is that even the people that I coach in business development, I help them build their businesses, is the biggest leaps and jumps that they make are the energetic ones. So I always like put that into my coaching, or, hey, let's reprogram your mindset, right? Like here's some affirmations, or if you just change your belief systems, or let's create a new identity. And the ones who do really try and work on it or meditate on these things, like the way that they're leaping in their business is incredible. And so the link between your energy and everything in your life, who you magnetize, your success, your business results, it is just so tied intricately every single moment. So through my whole journey, I've realized the most important thing I can do is focus on my energy and protecting my energy and elevating it to the highest vibrational level. And so that's been one of my most important practices. And what's fascinating, same thing. I wish I had known what I know now when I was modeling, because I was attracting in and magnetizing that success by pure, just the hard work portion of it, or trying the old ways, and not being aware as much of my energy. But then I had these health problems, had my own awakening, it started getting into quantum physics, because I'm the type of person too, I can't just be all woo woo. I needed the proof. I needed the logic behind why is this happening.
Right.
And then it started reminding me when I was a kid. So I would get really sick as a child. So if I went into crowded spaces and I didn't understand it, I'd get nauseous. And I was still carrying that into my life. When I look back, modeling was the same. I'd get so drained. And I was always in high frequency places with a lot of people. I didn't know how to protect my energy. So I was giving it to a lot of people. But then when I started honing in on it, which first started with healing myself from my autoimmune disorders, so I got diagnosed with arthritis, Sjogren's, fibromyalgia. And that's when I started learning about, you know, again, who knows, maybe it could be placebo effect, but from what I've studied from all the way back into ancient history, is quantum physics is very real and energy is very real. We can't see 99% of what's out there.
Sure.
And a lot of these studies will have very similar things. And it's usually very simple, some kind of sacred geometry shapes that you can place around your energy net, right? Auras are real. You can look into tons of studies about this. You can see CIA, government, studies about remote viewing. So if you want, you can go as far as you want into this, but it's very real is what I like to say at the end of the day.
Sure.
And so when I started applying this in a really real sense, I saw how it was affecting my business, but also affecting my personal life. That when I would do energetic practices of sweeping away, you know, negative things, or cutting cords, putting protection around myself, learning that I don't need to chase, because chase is an energy, but that you can start believing that when I rest, I receive, or the more joy I'm in, the more I magnetize, which goes against what people believe, because you think you have to work hard to get those things. So you can reprogram your energy because it's a frequency that you're living in. And that frequency is just like a magnet. So you're going to attract in what energetic state you're in.
Sure.
So that level of mastery I found is what sits at the top, like in a pyramid. And then that's going to affect every other thing in your life, every other thing during your day, to that point of even, if you're maybe even energetically a little off, or you're thinking no one's going to respond to me today, and you're going to do outreach all day long, you're not going to get a response because your background energy is, I don't know, this isn't working, or so that's going to be reflected back to you. So learning how to manage your thoughts and your energy, and the way I like to always kind of give the viewpoint for people is that we are technology. So even this is consciousness technology existing in the quantum. And we have our own light body or aura, which is our own operating system. So just like a computer, if we're just running on auto, we have an auto program growing in the background, but we're unaware like how much it's affecting the behavior of our machine and therefore the outcomes. So when you're able to, I think, take even a back view of yourself to become more self-aware, like how can I observe myself from this neutral point, like almost as if I'm a machine, I'm a technology, and how do I repair this operating system and upgrade it so that it's operating at a higher efficiency and frequency?
Yeah. It's very interesting. When I started focusing on not just allowing people in my life that I like, or, oh yeah, you're cool, or we share similar values, but not, and that's a layer to it. Do we share similar values? Can we even hold a conversation? That's a layer, of course. But now I would even say my primary layer on somebody when I'm assessing if this is someone I want in my life is, are you an energy drainer or an energy filler? And does my battery feel sustained or maintained, or even does it gain charge when I'm around you and I talk to you? Or do I feel like you're just sucking the life out of me? And it's funny because when I first started in business, I had all these thoughts and these feelings. And then I listened to my first entrepreneur and my first seminar where they put words to my feelings. And I was like, yes, that's what I've been thinking about this. And, it's not what you want to do, it's how you want to live. And oh, yeah. And then talking to you and getting into a lot of stuff over this last year, it was a similar experience where it put a lot of words to things I was feeling and thinking. And I remember even talking to some of my pastors and different people in my church. And how do I quantify some of this stuff in a biblical worldview? I have my faith in Christianity, and realizing that this is, because at first I thought, like you kind of said, the woo-woo, like, is this stuff even real? Is this full of shit? And then realizing that even the Bible itself talks about in spiritual gifts. One of them is discerning spirits. Is literally a spiritual gift. And that is the modern explanation, I guess, would be navigating energy and everything we're talking about. So it made me realize too, there's so many people I've written off for so long that are, maybe they would consider themselves spiritual or of different religions. And again, this goes back to being so dogmatic when you just don't listen to other people and you don't realize that, you shut everyone off, you double down on the things that you believe. And you, unfortunately, I think, because if you also believe that your religion or your belief or your politics or whatever, if you believe you're right and you want to be able to share that with people, then you have to build relationships and build bridges. Whereas a lot of people who are religious or very political, all they know how to do is burn bridges. And so, realizing that you and I and me and this person are way more similar than we are different. We might attribute certain things to different sources, whether it's God, the universe, this, that, the other. But ultimately, we're actually way more similar than we are different. And finding out those similarities and how we can both, work together, agree on certain things, find those energetic links. I find that's actually it's unlocked a lot for me this last year. To not just write people off just because maybe, well, if you're not exactly these criteria, I don't want you in my life. But because then it was hard for me sometimes to meet people and navigate mentally. Like even when I met you, well, we have some different beliefs, but I really like you. And I feel like energetically we connect. So how do I navigate that with my worldview? And, realizing sometimes your worldview can get in the way if you're, I know Carrie, you're familiar with Carrie James, Brand Alchemy. He talks about this thing called label in a bottle syndrome. So if you're in your own bottle, you don't see the label on the outside. And sometimes you need someone who's outside to look at you and say, hey, did you know you have a stain on the label? Did you know you have the sticky part of the sticker is coming off? Let me put that on for you again. And so
Yeah.
you've been an influence for me in that sense, like that, outside of the bottle, you know, restating to me things about my label that maybe I didn't fully, does that make sense? I feel like I'm rambling now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It makes sense. And, I think it is sometimes hard for people to see a more multidimensional view, because even you said something interesting of, maybe this person is right, or how do you know? But that would even go into further philosophical questions on like what is right or wrong. And, some truths have multiple truths, and so what I was interestingly picking up on when we're talking about that is actually the connection all the way back to high performing people and high performing teams, because I guess I haven't mentioned on this podcast, but I worked at a psychometric testing company. So it's all about pre-hire assessment tests for high performing teams. And they take cognitive tests, emotional intelligence tests, personality tests. And what was fascinating was that the qualities that make a high performer in terms of cognitive abilities, you're going to think like, oh, it's intelligence, or right, like working hard or things like that. It's not. The number one qualities are adaptability, and then openness. And those are really the top two, because then it equates to the third, which was how quickly can they learn and be trained, which equates to adaptability and openness. That goes to everything in life. So just like you're saying, like if you're getting stuck in one view or one belief, you're not being adaptable and you're not being open to life and to experiences. And so I just think I always keep that in mind, that the more adaptable, more open you are, actually the more high performing you are. And therefore it equates to happier people. Like that was even shown within the workplace, like people are happier when they are adaptable and open. And then they're also kinder people. So there was less HR problems. And you kind of see that, right? Like even playing out on the national stage, like the ones who are super, I am this, or I'm a Democrat, like they put labels on themselves and then they go into this identity rather than being flexible within it, and adaptable and open.
Yeah. It's it's funny we're saying this. As we're talking about this out loud, I feel like I'm verbal processing even a few things in my own life. Like when I met you almost a year ago now, I would say I was very determined in my path, and I knew exactly this is the outcome I want and this is the way I'm getting it. And working with you was just a temporary thing to make some cash because I was doing some stuff, but I had my goal. And since then, my life has exploded in so many ways. Some bad, some good, but ultimately all productive and in the right direction. And it made me realize, like, so I was on a walk the other night. I like to walk outside, like in the dark, in the middle of the night in the trails, which ironically enough started because I was heartbroken years ago. One time I just went in the trail late at night because I was crying, I was upset, and I was like, just an animal needs to just take me, or some gang member in the middle of the woods. I don't know why they'd be there, but my thinking was just like, I'm just going to go and maybe my life will end. And then I remember being petrified. Like I was so scared to walk alone outside at like 1 a.m. in the forest, essentially, because it's like the darkness is scary. The darkness is unknown. And I remember my adrenaline just shooting. I was like I could hear my heart beating. And so I remember just hearing my heart like beating out of my chest. And now it's a regular thing that I do. And I'm so peaceful and calm in the darkness. I feel like I own that fear now. I own that moment. And it's weird. Some people might hear that and be like, that's weird. You walk alone late at night. It's like, yes, but that's my time to meditate and pray. And I literally just talk to God out loud. So, I mean, mind you, if I come across like a creepy dude out there, I'm the one talking to myself. So he'll probably be scared. But all this kind of going back to the point of, the other night when I was walking, my prayers have shifted. My meditation time has shifted from, God, give me this dream that I said I want and I've determined that I want. And rather, I'm literally praying, God, please make every door that you open crystal clear that it's a door you're opening so I can just walk through it. And make it so clear when it's a door that I'm trying to force open or a door that somebody else is trying to open, right? That's not you. And so my prayer, even my meditation time has been now centered around being open, being adaptable. Because yes, I have a vision for my future. I have a vision of helping so many people and being a wealthy man, being a leader, all these things. But what does that look like? Which exact stages am I on? What exact business am I doing? I have no idea. And for the first time, I think in 10 plus years, I'm okay with that. And I'm actually finding peace in the unknown, where every day feels like a step. Like if you were like imagine you're in the darkness walking in like an air bridge, but the step doesn't appear until the momentum goes forward. That's kind of how it feels. And it was terrifying at first, but now it's like, and it's almost analogous to what I just said about walking in the dark. Maybe that's why I feel comfortable doing that, because that's kind of an analogy for my life. But in that walking in the darkness, I'm praying out loud. I'm meditating. I'm talking to my creator. I'm allowing that energy to just be open and saying, God, open these doors. And I'm not even asking you which doors to open. I'm asking you to just make and give me clarity around which doors are yours and which doors I'm trying to pry open. So
Yeah.
anyways, you help me kind of just piece that all together as we're talking right now. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and that's so important to do, because I think we were talking about it before too, because I was getting into more recently, like the more I rest, the more I receive, the more I enjoy, the more I magnetize, and also getting out of my own head, like you, okay, here's my end goal. How do I get there? But it's just, here's my end goal, and I'm going to leave it up to God or the universe, because maybe what I thought was going to take 10 years, they have other plans and they can rearrange it for 1 year. And if you're not open and you're not adaptable, you could totally miss all the blessings that everything's trying to work in your favor. And sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Like sometimes it's like that journey of the dark night of the soul will come, or something, a difficult lesson. But a lot of times that's right before a big quantum leap, which I think you were actually going through a bit, and kind of trying to get you to say, it's going to just keep that faith and keep going, which I'm curious for you, because you were saying, some good, some bad for you since, but I would say even just reflecting it back, I feel like I've seen you, even your personality grow so much in even just maybe 6-9 months, from where you felt or where you started. And now you're even doing podcasts, or you have such even expanded network and opportunities. But I'd love to know, like, do you feel like even though bad things happen, like if you look at your overall trajectory and your life and who you are, like has that improved? And do you think it's the energy portion that actually was like the bigger factor?
Yeah. It's, well, I would say, I said bad things, but I wouldn't even call them truly bad, because even though, like, okay, let me give you an example, right? A few years ago, I had a car accident, and in the moment when I'm in the accident, it doesn't feel all that great, but I was also in debt, like 25 grand all of a sudden, from the past year, some different decisions, some things I had to work through and whatever. So I had now gone in debt for the first time ever, 25 grand. And in the middle of the car accident happening, didn't feel great, but maybe a month, no, I would say 3 months later, approximately, I got a job that my first month I made 10K after tax, and the same month I got $18,000 from an insurance settlement for my car. So in 1 month, every single dollar of that debt was wiped out, and I was profitable. And in fact, I was profitable more than I had made from the previous job. So in 1 month, I paid off debt and made more money from the previous job. And that, I would say, that was such a slap in the face to help me realize, oh my goodness, these last few months I've been so stressed about how I'm going to pay my bills or how I'm going to do this or that. And yet in 1 month, everything was fixed. And so over the last few years, and I'm going to bore everyone with the details of my story right now. And I'm still working through a few things at the moment, but some more of the background details. And I will say, whether it's debt, whether it's relationships, whether it's whatever, everything I know can be, like you said, God can just flip things around in a split second. And I would say my biggest shift, and energetically my biggest shift, that I've had to be intentional about. It doesn't just come naturally. I've had to and I want to ask you in a second about affirmations, because this is something I've had to really, you gave me some that I wrote down, and I would start speaking to myself, because it matters. Changing the narrative and the story to say, if you're praying, if you're meditating or whatever, for me, I'd be praying and saying, God, I know ultimately this is building my character. It's building my story. And ultimately you can change everything tomorrow in a split second, in a heartbeat. So even though it feels tough in the moment, please let me have such a peace and transparency in this challenge so that I can learn the lessons necessary to move through it faster. Because they say don't get a motel while you're going through hell, right? Actually go through it, don't stay in it. So let me actually be able to move through this, but then learn what I need to learn so I don't have to repeat these mistakes. And yeah, and so I would say it's very hard to be in the shit and be grateful for it, but learning to become grateful in your trials and challenges and learning to become joyful in those things. Like, again, things can change in a moment. And even something like claiming bankruptcy, for example, can be such a weight off your shoulders if it actually leads to positive financial results in the future. Because now if you claim bankruptcy and the next month you made $20,000 all of a sudden, now rather than having to put $20,000 towards your debt, you're $20,000 more profitable that you could put towards building your credit. And so it's just rewiring the way we see things that are negative, like a car accident, like a bankruptcy, like any of these things. And so I'm still working on it. I'm not perfect by any means, but I would say I'm far more positive in my daily mindset. And it takes a lot of damn intentionality to do so. It is not something that comes naturally to me, or I think to most people, but definitely not to me. I've always said I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realistic, or I'm a cautious optimist, or some stupid term I'd give myself, right? But anyway, but I'd love to know again, what has that? Because you've helped me with some affirmations, and that's one of those woo woo things I always put off. And my old mentors would always say it. These videos I would watch would say it. You would say it, and I was like, oh man, maybe I should give these stupid things a try.
Yeah.
And it helps.
It works.
It helps.
It works. Yeah, it really does. It just goes back to that you're an operating system. And so the more you're repeating a new belief system, you're just rewiring and reprogramming yourself. But I think where people give up is they don't realize like how long it takes, but also it's almost a consistent life practice, because that starts to need to become your new thoughts all the time. So you need to start by interrupting, okay, what was the negative thought? And what's my new affirmation when I catch it? To just start repeating this. So some of my tips were, it was hard just to do it. So I would write it down. So on Post-it cards or index cards, and then tape it everywhere, on my monitor, on my mirrors in my bathroom, have it on my nightstand. I'd have it in my purse. I had it in my car. So whenever I wanted to reprogram myself I'd start with one affirmation, because, there's different studies out there. I think some people say like 21 days to develop a new habit if you did it every single day. Some people say it takes actually 90 days to rewire your brain. Some say 30 days. So it really depends. So I say just try to do it as much as possible. At least when you're starting with new affirmations, maybe do one for a week. And then the more you start banking affirmations, like now that's just your new vocabulary. So it's almost like memorization, like when you're studying. And a practice, if you really want to hone it in, especially self-love ones, you can look at yourself directly in the eye in the mirror, and they say that will accelerate it even quicker. So you can even set an alarm every hour to go look in the mirror and say it really quickly if you want to reprogram yourself fast. But yeah, I saw a huge change in my life because I grew up around very negative energies. My parents were typical, very emotionally immature, saying awful things all the time, very negative mindset, complete 180. And I struggled with major depression as a kid, major depressive episodes even throughout my whole life. As my baseline was these very negative thoughts and this awful way that I viewed myself because of how my parents talked to me. And so I used to always, that person was like, oh, I'm a failure. Or if I dropped something, I was like, oh, I'm so, expletives, like piece of dumb, really bad. Like I talked to myself awful. And I was beating myself up. And so it was really after, again, the health problems. So sometimes it takes a radical thing to happen. And that was it for me when I felt like I was losing my life, and realizing how much was tied to trauma, which then affects your body, and then learning energy and then how to reprogram myself. But then seeing that reflected in my life, where before maybe I had a lot of negative experiences or people or drama around. But when I started changing everything, everything changed. My success changed, my energy changed, my health changed, the people in my life. And so, yeah, and it all started with affirmations, which is very powerful. So I think people who haven't done it, it's like you maybe haven't done it to the degree you have to reprogram yourself. So don't just think you can say positive things for a day and suddenly your life's supposed to change.
Yeah.
It's just like we were talking about in the beginning. If you want to master something, you have to put consistent effort in over time. But then now, like, I don't have to learn new ones. They're programmed into me. So, and one of my favorite ones, which I do think I told you that one, is everything is always working out for me better than I could have ever hoped or dreamed or imagined.
Yeah.
Because when you start believing that, you also, even when something doesn't go that great, it's like you're saying something happens later and you're like, that's right. Everything is working out for me better than I hoped or imagined. Because maybe that negative thing launched something else down the line. And then more and more blessings will start to come to you, because if that's your belief, the universe is going to reflect it to you. And another one, I just said it earlier, was the more I rest, the more I receive. Like, that one is so important because we feel so guilty. I know I did. I was such a high performer. I thought I had to work all the time, train all the time. And if I didn't, I was going to fail at life. But it's a totally different mindset when you look at people born into wealth, born into security and safety. They don't have any of these thoughts. They just feel safe and secure, and that they're resting and their accounts are just making money, or they have passive income, or right, they have things to fall back on. So you have to learn to reprogram to get into that state. And yeah, it's definitely life-changing, and I think you have to do it for the rest of your life. But it's been really rewarding, even for myself, to see my basic affirmations like change people's lives too, that I pass it on to for people I coach, and to see how quickly you can actually turn your life around from that alone, which goes back to, I find it amazing how, because I'm coaching them at business at the same time, but how that's really the factor when it clicks for them. And then they look back and they're like, oh my God, everything is working out for me better than I hoped or imagined. When I first met them, it was like the world is over. They had no positive thoughts. So that's a good one to start on.
Yeah. I literally have it written within my own affirmations. And, you know, it makes me think too, I've seen so many, there's a few books I really love. One is The Dream Giver by Bruce Wilkinson. Another is The Go Giver by Bob Berg, and I forget the co-author's name, but similar titles, very different books. But it talks about, especially The Dream Giver, it talks about this success journey as if it's like you will go through these phases. And I remember when I read it, the book is very on the nose. It's a boy named Ordinary lives in the land of familiar. An everyday ordinary goes to the regular job and comes home to family to watch the box. Like, it's, you know, it's very, what's the word? Like a parable, right? It's very, and so one day Ordinary comes home and he sees a feather on his windowsill, and it's given to him by the Dream Giver. And on the feather is the name of his big dream. And so he goes into the border of the town of Familiar, and at the border are his border bullies who he thought were going to be these big enemies, but it was his mom and it was his uncle and it was his best friend. And then eventually he goes through the border and goes into the wasteland. And you get the point, right? So I remember when I read this book the first time, I think I was on the border. And I was like, wow, yeah, it's such a cool book. Whoa, this is cool. And then I read it a year later, and I'm deep in the wasteland. And then I read it a year later, and now I'm past the initial wasteland, and I was in the Garden of Peace. But then after the Garden of Peace comes the Valley of the Giants. And like, I got chills even saying this, because, and I want to know your thoughts on this. There's so much about this journey, about this success, high performance journey, that like we have processes for everything. 1 + 1 is 2. You do this experiment, you make this chemical, you do that. Like, everything is so, what's the word for this? Everything has such a clear defined process to lead us to a result. And yet when it comes to success, what do most people say? Well, it's not for everybody, and some people get lucky, and he was born into it, or his mom had money. It's always an excuse why you can't do it and why few can. Rather, nobody really talks about this almost universal law of a process that you need to go through. You've been through the wasteland. I've been through the wasteland. We've been through the border bullies. We've, and if I told you each section of the book, you'd keep nodding your head because I know you've been through some. In fact, I could probably guess where you are in the book. And you know what I mean? And it's like, how creepy is it that a guy 25 plus years ago wrote about my exact story without knowing me? And yet it's not just my exact story. And that blew my mind. And so I'd love to know, I'll try to make this into some kind of a question. How much of this journey do you think is objective? You need to do this, you need to think a certain way and speak a certain way and affirmations, versus the subjective where, well, it's going to be different for everybody and you're going to have to, because I've actually started to come to the understanding that I think it's more of a universal law and a path you need to follow rather than, yeah, some people make it and some people don't. I don't think it's as subjective as people make it out to be. I think it's pretty defined. I think there are rules along this path. Do you agree with that, or what do you think?
Yeah, I love these questions, but I always find them multi-layered, where I think there's two levels to it, where it's, okay, what are the steps of what you're learning in that exact process? But then there's another layer of you as your own unique individual soul. And what did you come here to learn? So I think that's the hierarchy of it, where that's the first level. And so from my own studies, what I've come to understand and believe is that there are two parts of that, where, yes, certain souls have certain destiny nodes. So even if you look at ancient cultures, even say in palms, like some people are more they have more of a destiny, but it's more because they've aligned certain things that they need to hit that their soul's supposed to learn. And so if they're not going in that direction, say there's like 4 pillars you're supposed to really learn or do in that life, you coded that for yourself, then the universe will keep directing you and having issues until you hit that node, right? Like it could be, again, health problems or something. Usually it's crisis to get you to awaken or to hit something. So there's that, but then there's also souls where it's like, it's their rest life. They just came from a bunch of wars and whatnot. And so they're supposed to learn to actually just rest or maybe make a family. So I like that perspective personally, because I think it puts away this whole, what is every soul supposed to do? And like, as if we all have this, again, black and white, like one thing equals success, one life, like what makes happiness? It's no, we're all super different and have different things we're meant to learn, like whether one's supposed to learn to create more. Some you learn through relationships. So you are supposed to have more of those. So I think that's the first unique layer. But then I think on the sub level of a soul's journey, like you're saying, for entrepreneurship or trying to get to a professional athlete or these kinds of things, I do see patterns, and I do think it is related, where it's, again, a mini version of your soul cycle that you have to go through. But I do think all these paths are different, because what I can see even when I coach people is people can quantum leap, right? Like depending how much they're putting in, how quickly they road program, sure, all of that really factors in. So they can be going and expanding really quickly, hitting their nodes, and going through these individual lessons quicker. And then some, it can take forever. They can circle through a lot. And then from what I understand is then if you don't hit those nodes, you pretty much reincarnate to kind of try to hit them again. And that's always been, actually, maybe, again, who knows, right? Anything, but that belief system has actually served me very well, because it makes me worried that if I don't hit my highest self or follow the visions that I was born with, that I feel like I want to create this, and if I don't, I'm going to regret it, that I'm going to have to come back and figure out how to do it anyway. So I might as well figure out how to do it now. And so that kind of is a great motivating factor for me to have as like a belief that it's like, why wait? You might as well act now towards what you're dreaming of.
Yeah. That's why I like talking to you so much, because we have, I think, such different beliefs on some of these things and I love it. I love talking about these things with you, because it's in such a unique perspective that some people might have a multiple life perspective where they're using it as the excuse, though, right? Well, I'll just do it in my next life. And here on this one, I'm just going to hurt people. I'm just going to be lazy. I'm going to live selfishly. But rather you hold that perspective, and yet you use it as a reason to be productive, a reason to help, a reason to do. So it's so interesting and fascinating because it's, yeah, like, it just goes back to things are so gray. And even we as humans, like, if I just approach you and talk to you through my lens and I'm not open, I'm not adaptive, and I'm not able to receive what you're saying without, I'm not saying you and me, I'm saying anybody. Maybe a guy comes from Nigeria and he has a very different view on, I don't know, on money or on family or on any major topic. If I just come at this lens of I'm right, you're wrong, versus, you know what? I don't know. I don't know how you grew up. I don't know why you believe what you believe. And even though the gentleman from Nigeria may not sway my opinions, he may not sway my belief system, if I'm at least open to understanding his, then I think it just allows for so much more balance in our lives and in our relationships. And if I ever want to truly be this connector that I label my podcast as, then how can I be judgmental in my initial interactions and my initial, characterization of people? And I mean, maybe this is a hot take, but I do think it's okay to judge. I really do, because we all do it all the time. People just always use the escape phrase, well, you shouldn't judge people. Why? Why not? I don't see why not. The Bible itself doesn't say not to judge. It literally says take the log out of your own eye on that topic before you start to judge and lead others towards purity or towards success. So if I'm watching pornography every single day and I start judging a young man for being, okay, take the log out of my own eye before I start mentoring and guiding this young man. That's the whole point. And so whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran, whether it's whatever, taking anything out of context and using it to further your goals, I think is foolishness and is manipulative. And so that's why it's funny to me, even when people use the Bible, and I'm very much a Christian, but half the time I hear people using a Bible verse from Daniel. Well, this means that God wants to do this in my life. I'm like, no, it doesn't. Read the whole thing. God's literally talking specifically to like one dude named Uzziah, and it's or it's not even God talking. It's like this dude is talking to this dude and they're just having a conversation, but people will use one part of that little sentence and use it as a life mantra, and they'll get it tattooed, right? And so I see this in my own faith, in my own arena. I see this all over the place, obviously, but I just, as we kind of come up on the end of our chat here, I just want to emphasize that this ability to connect, hear each other out, agree to disagree on different things, but respect each other's opinions and beliefs, and then come to that common ground is something I thank you for helping me really be more gentle, I think, with some topics that maybe I was a little bit aggressive on at times. And so, yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate our relationship. Thank you for coming on and talking today. And I don't know if you want to end it maybe with maybe a fun story, or maybe something you're excited about moving forward into the next, months or so. So people actually, yeah, if you want to maybe wrap up by something you're excited about moving forward. And then if you want to wrap up with like where people can find you, whether it's socials or website or yeah. And then that way we can end on a super positive, fun note.
Awesome. Well, yeah, this was a really fun conversation to go into different topics. Something I'm excited about is I'm actually going to go travel for a while. So in an interesting way, I was living in Asia for a decade, modeling, being in the entertainment industry, and then I was back in business for a decade in the US, building my company. So I just got to a point where I realized, you know what, I need to find more joy, because that was my intention for 2025. So I feel like the universe or God was showing me all the places I didn't have that set up, especially for long term. So I'm on a journey of joy going forward. So I'm going to travel for a bit, and it feels right to reconnect with my connections from Asia and going in with a whole new energy now of, okay, I'm a businesswoman, or I'm more in control of what I'm creating there, rather than modeling was a lot more just receiving and sitting back and where do I go next? Like, what country am I going to? So I'm super excited for that, because I'm finally taking, I guess, my business internationally in that way. And Ooh. Yes, yay. And then I'm going to work on in the background a couple new things, but one's coming up, Waka World, which is really going to be a consciousness community, and also Waka Matcha. So I love matcha, but I'm going to put Japan in my trip and have a matcha brand in the near future.
Interesting.
But yeah, you can find me at LinkedIn, also social media at Sofia Waka. And you can find my website soon, wakagrowth.com, but we're just down for a moment as I'm restructuring things before I travel.
Cool. I love it. Well, thank you so much. We'll have to do this again because you and I can talk for hours and hours. But yeah, it's a blessing knowing you. I'm grateful for you, and I'm excited to talk to you soon and excited to see some of these photos on this trip and invite me to come with you as well.
Yes, we'll see. This was great. So great having you and seeing you and chatting with you.
Thanks, Sophia.